So here we are again, and you're still listening, which is jolly, jolly nice of you. I'm now going to read to you the fifth story from the Gates short story collection, and it's the title story, and it's called The Gates, obviously, the stupid boy. Anyway, I want to turn this into a novel if life is ever long enough for me to turn it into a novel. And don't be worried, because it won't be giving anything away, because I reckon this short story is probably only the first couple of chapters of the novel when it does ever get written. So here we go, The Gates. When I climb up onto the top of the mausoleum, which looks like a Greek temple from the books I keep, I can see over the walls that surround this place. I can see all the way into town, all the way to the railway station, and I can see and hear the trains arriving and leaving, or rushing through without stopping. I stretch out my arms to reach them, but I can never touch them. In my youth, when I was about 6 or 7, I suppose, someone, a visitor, a friend of my parents, bent down to me, ruffled my hair, and told me that I was bound to become a railwayman. But I've never been on a train. That view from the top of the Palladian mausoleum is the closest I've ever been to a train. The thing is, I can't leave this place. I can walk to the gates, but I can't go beyond them. The first time I tried to escape, it wasn't even a deliberate attempt to escape. I didn't know there was something to bind me to this place. It was just after that unnamed visitor had awakened my interest in the trains. My parents were busy with a funeral, or preparing a funeral, and it was in the middle of the summer when the days were endless, and time seemed nothing more than abstract symbols on people's watches, not an interminable rhythm of sun and dark, of seasons and their opposites. I wandered down to the main gates, following the sunbeams, thinking they were showing me where I had to go. I remember touching the metal gates, rusty even that long ago, and enjoying their rough texture, the sense of rubbing age onto my little hands as a colour with which to disguise my paleness. They were huge gates, and when open reached what must have been 5 grown men's strides into the cemetery. That gave me 8 more children's strides of happiness, because what happened when I crossed the threshold, the line separating the cemetery from the rest of the world, set my skin on fire and implanted unhappiness into my mind for all time. Even now, I walk those last steps of my happiness slowly, ever so slowly, savouring each crunching footstep on the gravel path, well-shaven grass and low headstones to either side of me. I feel the warmth on my face still, so gentle, and the scent of summer is strong in my memory. I heard the noise of the city rolling up the hill, up the road, rolling the other way down into the centre towards the Holy Grail of the railway station. And then I reached the edge of the wall, stopped to turn round and look towards my parents' house, half hidden next to the mausoleum, surrounded by statues and headstones of all colours, as if I was saying goodbye to them, as if I was taking my first steps to independence, leaving forever into an adventure of my own making. It could be that I'm giving my childish self too great a power of thought and analysis, but that's what I remember. Those are the impressions that my boiled brain still holds of that day. One more step. A light too bright to bear shatters my eyes, sounds the like of which I'd never heard break my eardrums. Invisible ropes of fire wrap themselves around my wrists, my ankles, my arms, my calves, my thighs, my legs. Pain explodes everywhere, in my chest, in my groin, in my head, and I'm thrown backwards onto the sharp gravel. When people say that graveyards are the homes of horror, they're only telling a half-truth. It's what's outside that's really horrific. I saw a man sawing in half the wife he'd killed secretly, with sly calculation, the huge pot of boiling water ready for the parts he would make of her. I saw a woman stand behind her lover, with an ordinary kitchen knife in her right hand, her left arm still bent around him in a charade of love, heard the slow-motion scrape of her digging the knife deeply in between his shoulder blades, until he stopped convulsing, until she could let go of him and let him slide into a pool of his own blood, a smile still on his face of being loved. I saw lies and death through the pain the boundary had inflicted on me. The back of my head was bleeding. The pain wouldn't let me shake the gravel out of my hair, and I lay there for who knows how long on the path in the paling sunlight at the end of the day, staring at the darkening blue sky. And I saw more then, lying still, thinking I was dying, unable to cry, unable to call out, paralysed by the apparent evil of the outside world. I saw the man leaving his wife with a loving kiss, only to disappear into a house 2 roads down and rip off his clothes and those of his lover, and immerse himself into a skeletal embrace of bone-chafing passion. I heard an old woman, with her old cat on her lap, planning in her head how to rid herself of the pest that was eating her out of house and home. I felt the scorching thoughts of a young girl locked into her bedroom by her parents, swearing to kill them when they let her out, swearing to run away with the first man who crossed her path the next day on the way to school. The burden of other people's lives pushed me deeper into the gravel path, made me immobile, turned me into a child much older than I should have been. "What's happened to you?" my father said when I finally crawled back to the house. I tripped. I wanted to get to my bed without too many words. "Nothing to trip on, is there?" he said. "You'll have to show me in the morning. Can't have people tripping up in my place." I wasn't looking where I was going, I said. "Ah," he said, "that'll be it." He turned to my mother, who was in the background, fussing over one thing or another as usual. "We'll have a look tomorrow anyhow." I crept off to my bed, barely managed to clamber onto it and take in its fresh scent before I fell asleep without taking off my clothes. That's where my mother found me the next morning. "Get up," she said, more roughly than usual. "5 burials today." I don't think I can," I said. "Don't be silly," she said. "Your dad needs you." "Does he really?" I said. "Where's all this coming from, boy?" She sat down on the edge of my bed, laid her hand on my forehead. "You're right cold." She tutted. "What's got into you?" "Nothing," I said. "I just don't feel right." "You're an odd one," she said. "I'll bring you a cup of tea. You'll feel right after that." There was something in her eyes, something I couldn't decipher, not that young, not that unknowing, not so far away from understanding. She disappeared and I fell asleep again. She was back what seemed like a second later. "Here you are," she said. "Drink it while it's hot. It'll make you feel better." And it did. I was up and out, not caring about whatever scabs had formed on my skin and in my brain and in my heart overnight. Everything was normal again. Everything was normal again as I moved through the mist to where my father dug 5 fresh graves without me hearing the cut of the spade into the ground, without me hearing the grass screaming when he pulled up the turf and laid it aside, ready to be resettled. "Boy," he said, "stand up straight and be seen. That's all they want." The processions came through the wide open gates, through the murky clearing air, horses and carts, hearses with whispering engines, the chief undertaker in front, a mock solemnity painted on his face by whatever duty he might have felt, probably that of the excessive amount of money he was asking for his benign and blessed services. One after the other they came, an endless disease of losses amidst our greenery, put to bed by a simple nod of the head and the tumbling of earth from a succession of handfuls, until they were all buried, and the cars were all gone again, and the carts too. They all seemed black and white to me. "Your face needs looking at, lad," my father said. "Nothing to worry about," I said. "Your mother was worried," he said. "She fusses," I said. "Everyone fusses," he said, "only sometimes it's not nothing." I wasn't about to give away my failure and fright. I climb on the monuments too much. "Then stop it," he said, and mopped his forehead, running with sweat by now. "Just help me with all this, and I need help, by God." "Yes, Dad." "Come and help me clean these spades now," he said, "and then we can make sure the soil's settling right on those poor people's bones." "Yes, Dad." I was going to say nothing, even though I wanted to find out more. Small steps, small victories. If only. Of course, I forgot about all this too quickly, what between all the books my parents put on the small table in my bedroom for me, and the essays they made me write, and the questions they asked me about what I was learning from them. I didn't think it was strange that they didn't make me go to school. I probably didn't even know what school was then. And so the cuts healed and the scabs fell off, and I got new cuts and bruises from my climbing around the endlessly changing mausoleums and chasing the cat around the huge garden that surrounded our home here, in the middle of nowhere, and in the middle of a big city at the same time. Years passed without markers, carelessness in their wake, and I can only remember the summer heat and the winter coldness, the edge taken from it by the dead trees my father and I would chop into small enough bits to fit into the wood burner in the living room of our stone house right in the centre of the seemingly endless wilderness of the cemetery, and the gates seemed further away than ever. The thing is, I didn't get bored marooned there because it didn't feel like I was marooned. It was my whole world, that place, and I didn't need anything else. I didn't feel a desire to see what was beyond the overgrown walls, what it was that was being hidden from me. And now it's the present, and my parents are much older, and I'm more man than boy. I'm sitting on the top of that old temple again, staring out into the city for some reason or another, a strange feeling in my stomach, listening out for the trains and hearing nothing, seeing nothing, catching the occasional waft of sea air from the west, a salty tang into the sweet aroma of all the blooms around me, the middle of the summer, a day or two away. What are you doing up there? A voice I've never heard before. Sitting, I say, and look down. She has her hands on her hips, her black hair down past them, swaying as she bends back her head, squinting at me. Sitting, she says. Aren't you afraid of falling? I shake my head. I've fallen too often to be afraid of it. Are you going to come down and talk to me? She says. Can't you climb? I say. All right, she says, and reaches her long fingers into the cracks time has inflicted on the stone. Her short dress flutters as she rushes up towards me, and then she's sitting next to me. What can you see? She says. The same as you, I presume, I say. Tell me what it is. I point straight ahead, the railway station, across the river. Then I point to the west. The sea's out there somewhere, although I can't see it. I've never seen you before, she says. Don't you have a name? Her skin is white, without blemish. I do, she says. What is it? You tell me yours first. Why, I say, it seems like a fair exchange. Annika, she says, but doesn't hold her hand out to me like she should if we're being introduced for the first time. It was in one of those books my parents had me read. I've never seen you before either, I say. I'm new. She looks at me. Her eyes are as black as her hair. You were going to tell me your name. Arno, I say. That's the name of this place, she says. You're making fun of me. Arno's Vale is the name of this place. I'm called Arno. There's a difference. Seems a bit odd to me, she says. So does you suddenly appearing and climbing up here, I say. You asked me to. Her voice is as smooth as her skin and sounds like I would imagine an angel to speak. There are many angels in here, on just about every grave. I didn't ask you to come into my garden, I say. It's a public place, she says. Everyone comes here. The nails on her left hand scrape at the moss on the roof we're sitting on. Sooner or later. What's it like out there? I say. Haven't you ever been out there? She says. No. And then I remember from nowhere that little boy running at the gates and being thrown back, of the pain of fire I felt. I shudder and look at my hands. You've gone very pale, she says. Are you all right? I say, I don't understand. What? She rubs her hands together impatiently. Tell me. She leans against me. I feel the coolness gathered on her skin and the waft of a fragrance that calms me and frightens me and excites me. Why haven't you been out there? She says. It's where I come from. I tell her about that unexpected memory, about the burning, about the feeling that I can't step across that threshold. And then I hold my head in my hands and daren't look up again. It's childish imagination, she says, and jumps up precariously so her shadow is between me and the sun, between me and the green trees, even huger now than when I was a boy. It can't be, I say. And you haven't tried since then? It never occurred to me to. What about friends, she says. I never felt like I needed any. Come with me now, she says. And I want to, and I jump up, and I will. I will, I say, just let me tell my parents first. Tell them when you get back, she says. They'll not miss you, will they? They wouldn't let you sit up here if they missed you. That's only because the day's work's done, I say. All the burial's done until tomorrow. So they don't need you until then, she says. I can't stay out all night, I say. She puts her hand on my chest. Can't you? She puts her lips on mine, and I feel her tongue slide into my mouth, so cool, so delicious, so sweet, so familiar. She lets go of me. That's nice, isn't it? She says. I can do nothing but nod. I've lost all my words into her. We clamber down the still warm stone, jump the last few feet onto the soft green floor of my cage. She grabs hold of my hand and runs towards the gates with me, trailing an arm's length behind her. I see them come closer, ever closer, want to slow down and can't. The walls of green and brown speed up around me, make me dizzy, and I smell the freshness of the soil, as if I was standing on a newly dug grave. My breath is loud in my ears, scrapes up and down my throat in slow motion. And she's there, her face full of joy, her legs long and the dress flashing around her, let loose into a flurry of white shapes and desire and hope. And then I see reality, the way I saw it when I'd last been here, when I'd last tried to work my way out into those tempting colours, see nothing but the skeletal remains of a city that once thrived. See no people, just wraiths, just black and white shapes dissolving. And then the pain, the inescapable fire burning on my skin, ripping it away from my bones, stretching me into a million thin slices of myself, threatening to split me into innumerable particles of dust. Gone, gone, everything gone, and then nothing. I can't feel her hand anymore, and she was so close a second ago. Blackness. I pick myself up from the glass gravel, look at my hands and my naked arms. Nothing. No sign of the fire, no sign of an explosion. I look towards the gates again, see the long black form lying there, black hair stretched out, a layer of the world I'll never know. I walk up to her quietly, a cry storming out of my guts of loss and desperation. Her face is intact, no scars, no bone peeking through the wasted skin, no wasted skin to see. She sits up. That's strange, she says. I can't go back. Where did you come from? I say. My father's voice, deep, solid, homely. From outside, he says, from before. I turn round. What? There was a war, he says, a terrible war, a long time ago. Everyone died. He looks at her. At least we thought they did. We found our way here from underground, she says, more intact and beautiful than ever. But I'm the only one left. What about those burials, I say? My father stretches out his arms, the dead burying their own. His skin is the colour of the earth. He swallows deeply. Back to the house, quickly. He turns and runs. She takes hold of my hand again. She's warm now. We chase after my father. I can hardly see him. We clatter through the door into the kitchen. My mother's at the table and my father sits down beside her, clutches at her hand, clutches her to him. You found her then, she says, a light in her eyes I've never seen. Who? I say. The one you need to take our places, she says. Her skin turns from white to earth. It's time for us now, she says to my father. He nods and looks at me. This is what we waited for. No, no, I say, and can't move. You too. You have to be here. If others come, he says. They will come, my mother says. They will. Annika walks me to them. They're almost gone now, crumbling at their edges. I will love him, she says, as if she's known them all their lives. Their separating shapes nod until all that's left is an emptiness of soil and earth.